and welcome to your favorite bookish podcast, Fully Booked and Caffeinated. I'm Kelsey,
And I'm Heather.
and today we will be discussing and reviewing Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. As usual, let's talk about our fuel for this discussion. What are you drinking this morning, Heather?
I have a cup of coffee with sweet creamer, and the International Delight French vanilla cold foam.
I actually had that cold foam on an espresso martini, and it was delicious.
Was it the French vanilla or the sweet cream? Because I also bought the sweet cream. I have that one at work, and it's actually a lot better than the French vanilla.
I think it was the sweet cream.
Mm-hmm. They're both good, but I prefer sweet cream over anything.
Yeah. Well, it's good because it was like bottled espresso martini, so it made it creamier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's pretty good.
Nice. What about you?
I just have a boring Nespresso coffee with some cinnamon roll coffee creamer. No fancy cold foam, but it's delicious.
I've been on a cinnamon kick at Starbucks lately. Every time I go there now, I get the cinnamon dolce latte.
Oh, that one is good. I like that a lot.
I haven't tried the Dunkin' cinnamon vanilla coffee yet because I'm nervous because I don't really like many of their syrups. I only like the caramel and the butter pecan. So I'm nervous to try like their cinnamon because if I don't like it, then
they're so funny popping off. Like they have all these new drinks.
I know.
And I'm like, you're just mixing different syrups together. Stop trying to troll us. But also I love the Ben Affleck commercials, so I'm not that mad about it.
I know. I agree.
All right, well, cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about S.A. Cosby, aka Sean. He's a writer who currently resides in Virginia, and I know that we're supposed to be talking about him, but his wife owns a funeral home in Virginia, and she's a licensed mortician, which is obviously the dream for weirdos like me. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So she probably gives him like a lot of information for his books.
Exactly. And he helps out at the funeral home when he's not writing. He actually drives the hearse.
That's actually really cool.
So other than that, he's been trying to become a writer for a really long time. He didn't come from a background of journalism like some of the other authors that we cover. He did get a few short stories published over his time writing, but his big break came with Blacktop Wasteland, which was published in 2020, and Cosby was in his late 40s.
Wow.
Yeah, so he really stuck with it. I mean, he had other jobs, but none of them were journalism or writing based. He was just kept on trying to make this his career, and amazingly, it's kind of like Delia Owens' situation. Yeah. It came late in life, and now, so that book, Blacktop Wasteland, was hugely successful. It won a ton of awards. The film rights for that book and for Razorblade Tears have been purchased, although there hasn't been any concrete updates or movement on either of them, but they do have the film rights secured for them. So most of all, he focuses on the South in all of his books, on social issues and gritty and complex characters. So this book, Razorblade Tears, was published in July 2021, and it's categorized as a mystery thriller, which it definitely is, but the social commentary is so strong that while I was reading it, I wasn't necessarily thinking thriller so much.
No, me either.
Because, like, obviously there's the unknown killer aspect, but it kind of feels secondary.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So here is our Goodreads summary, of course. A black father, a white father, two murdered sons, a quest for vengeance. Ike Randolph has been out of jail for 15 years, with not so much as a speeding ticket in all that time. But a black man with cops at the door knows to be afraid. The last thing he expects to hear is that his son Isaiah has been murdered, along with Isaiah's white husband Derek. Ike had never fully accepted his son, but is devastated by his loss. Derek's father, Buddy Lee, was almost as ashamed of Derek for being gay as Derek was ashamed of his father for being a criminal. Buddy Lee still has contacts in the underworld, though, and he wants to know who killed his boy. Ike and Buddy Lee, two ex-cons with little else in common other than a criminal past and a love for their dead sons, band together in their desperate desire for revenge. In their quest to do better for their sons in death than they did in life, hardened men Ike and Buddy Lee will confront their own prejudices about their sons and each other as they rain down vengeance upon those who hurt their boys. So this is like, it gives us just a small opening and then a pretty good summary of
Yeah.
what's to come. Obviously, trigger warning, we will be discussing racism, homophobia, transphobia. Also, if you read this book, it is very graphic, very violent, etc. So we open with a Shakespeare quote. My drops of tears all turn to sparks of fire. And we have a somewhat confusing family situation. They did explain it in the book summary, but stick with me because we're going to go through it again. So Isaiah and Derek are married. Isaiah's black and Derek is white, so they're an interracial gay couple. Both of their dads, Ike and Buddy Lee, served time in jail and didn't accept their gay lifestyle. So Ike is also known as Riot Randolph, and he served time for manslaughter, but he has killed at least 10 people.
If I feel like it's probably even more than that.
Yeah, and we don't get too many details at all.
No.
He just says it in an offhand way. And we're like, okay. And Buddy Lee was in prison for drug trafficking. Now, Isaiah and Derek had a 3-year-old daughter, Ariana, who Ike and his wife, Maya, now have to raise. And Maya never had an issue with Isaiah being gay. And there's this underlying strain on the relationship between Ike and Maya because Maya was basically a single mother while Ike was in prison. So Ike wasn't there for Isaiah's childhood. And then when he is finally able to be a part of his life, when Isaiah is older, now he doesn't accept him for his relationship with Derek. So it's like it's not only an issue between Ike and Isaiah, it's an issue with Maya because she doesn't understand why Ike can't just like shut the fuck up and accept his son. Derek's mom, Chrissy, is also a real homophobic bitch, and she kicked Derek out of her life for him being gay. And they're in Virginia, so they don't harp on the religious aspect too much, but it's definitely alluded to that their relationship was an abomination and a sin. And we hear those words a lot. They don't specifically say, like, because of God, but like it's implied that it's a religious
it's like
thing.
An undertone.
Yeah. And obviously we're in the South, so racism is even more amplified than in other circumstances. So Derek and Isaiah were murdered in a professional style shooting, and the cops have no leads because no one's talking. So Buddy Lee wants to start their own investigation, and Ike is against it because he gave up his life of crime when he left prison, and he can't get involved in anything crazy because he has built his business. He has a landscaping business. He's built it from nothing. He's completely changed his life and his behaviors and made it a point to put all of that behind him. And he knows that if he goes down that path, it's going to be really easy for him to slip into his old ways. And about 2 months after their death, all of that changes because someone vandalizes the headstones of both men with racial and homophobic slurs, and Ike changes his mind real quick about his nonviolence vow. What did you think about this, like, initial decision for them to take the investigation into their own hands?
I liked it. I thought that it was an interesting concept because obviously I feel when it comes to the police force, especially when it's a black man that's murdered, no one cares. And then on top of that, it's an interracial, gay couple. So I feel like that amplifies that even more. So I don't think the police really even cared that much to really look into it. And they come from a family of criminals. So I think that there's a lot against the case for it to be taken seriously. Even though it's obviously a horrendous murder, clearly how it's described, I feel like there was no movement on the case, and I don't think there would have been. So I think this is the only way for them to actually get justice and closure.
And it was clearly not an accident and clearly not like a murder-suicide. Like, this was done professionally, execution style shooting. Like, this is something that needs to be investigated, and it's not. I mean, I think it was stupid, obviously, just because at the beginning they were being so reckless and they could have been arrested at any point.
Yeah.
And then they wouldn't have got the justice that they wanted because they'd freaking be in jail. But exactly like you said, I understand how they rationalized it. This was the only way to actually get
Mm-hmm.
justice. And this was the only way to prove in their minds that they loved their sons,
Yeah.
which is so horrible. But it's this underlying. There's a couple times where, especially Buddy Lee will be like talking to himself or talking to his son and saying, like, I know that you wouldn't agree with what we're doing. I know that you would want us to forgive these people or you wouldn't want us to get violent or whatever. And he's like, but we're different people. This is
Mm-hmm.
how I handle things. And even though you wouldn't agree with it, like, you're not here to stop me. And
No.
this is the way I'm going to handle it.
And also, I feel like Buddy Lee will do what Buddy Lee wants to do, regardless.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, he says, like, I can never be the man that Derek was, and Derek would never be the man that I was. So he basically says, like, I'm not going to change, but at least let me put who I am to good use and
Mm-hmm.
make sure that we get justice in the meantime.
Yeah, I agree.
So the men go from zero to violent real quick. Like, just immediately, they start following leads and just roughing people up
Uh-huh.
that, to me, it seemed really apparent were not involved and didn't know anything. Like, the amount of violence that they balanced out for the very small amount of information they got seemed not to correlate.
Yes, I agree with that.
They're like breaking cake displays, breaking fingers, slamming kids around. Not kids, but young people.
Yes, young people.
So even though they're both homophobic, we also see the racism. And this is important because it's not blatant racism on Buddy's part. He doesn't even think that he's racist,
Mm-hmm.
but he makes these offhanded comments. So even though Buddy is a convicted criminal, he doesn't realize that he still has white privilege. So he says that he got 5 years for a trunk full of meth. And Ike is like, if a black man was caught with that, they would bury him under the jail. And he's like, I know guys personally who've been put away for longer than that for just weed, which of course we know is 100% true in real
Mm-hmm.
life. But Buddy doesn't really see it like that because he sees it as, well, I still got convicted. I still went to jail. Like, he
Yeah.
doesn't see the different layers, and he just makes stupid comments like, oh, well, I'm not really around black people often. So, like, I never really thought about it before. And I think that Ike does a really good job of not babying Buddy at all, but educating him.
Yeah, I think that this was actually one thing I did like about the book. I think that the whole approach to racism was really well done. And because as a reader, it made me reflect on like my opinion of the situation and how correct Ike is and how he explained things.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that the author's approach to racism was really well done.
Yeah. And one of my favorite parts was, like, at the very beginning when they first start on their little journey, and Buddy Lee is basically saying to Ike, like, oh, you got this great life. Look at this landscaping business. Look at this truck. Like, I'd gladly take
Mm-hmm.
all this. And Ike does this little monologue of, like, yeah, you can take the truck, but you also are going to get pulled over for no
Yeah.
reason. You also have to watch your back doing this, that, and the third. Like, he basically says, like, yeah, I've made all of this for myself. I've worked doubly as hard to get it, triply as hard, because
Yeah.
he's also, an ex-criminal. And he's like, so you just see the fruits of my labor. You
Mm-hmm.
don't see what still comes along with it.
Yep.
So I agree. I thought it was done in a way that made you reflect, which
Yeah.
is definitely what they intended. So meanwhile, there's another parallel storyline of this motorcycle gang trying to get info on a girl named Tangerine. And it turns out that Isaiah was trying to get Tangerine to talk for a story because he's a reporter. And whoever doesn't want her talking wants to find out where she went. So we don't know who is basically contracting this motorcycle gang to handle business for them.
Mm-hmm.
And the motorcycle gang sends 2 guys to search the reporter's apartment, aka Derek and Isaiah's apartment, and they run into Buddy Lee and Ike, just just happened to run into them in this apartment. And Buddy, Lee, and Ike just happened to kill one of the guys and dispose of his body by dismembering and putting him in a wood chipper.
That was fantastic. I did enjoy that.
I enjoyed it, especially because this was like their first kill in this little quest. Spoiler alert, there's plenty more to come. But also the fact that it was just so, like, what's the word I'm looking for? It was so easy for them to just muscle memory.
Oh yeah,
go back
there was
to,
no, it was 100%. They both just fell back into that lifestyle without a thought. And it was, definitely just mind over matter. They were just going straight into what they knew had to be done. And I just think that it's actually ironic that Ike's landscaping knowledge and skills come in handy. He's like, okay, now I've chopped him up and now he's going to be like manure for everything else now.
That's so true. Like, it comes up several times where he uses that knowledge and the tools that he has at his disposal. Yep. Actually, he uses gardening tools as weapons, like, a lot.
Yes, which I
and it's so love. Funny. Yeah, I loved he used some tools that I didn't even know what they were, but they explained them. And like a machete and just like random shit when it's like everyone else is rolling up with like guns and pocket knives.
Yeah.
And Ike is rolling up with like a pointy shovel. Like,
I feel like Ike is a black MacGyver. He's like, I got this. He just can make anything work in his favor.
But in an extremely violent way.
Obviously.
Because, so they kill this guy and then they're like, okay, cool, let's get rid of the body. And then they just flawlessly, dismembering, put him in the wood chipper, bleach and everything. Ike is like, okay, I'm going to have to get rid of his machine so that there's no DNA or whatever in it. Like, they're just so matter of fact about the whole thing. And they're not that concerned with any heat being on them. Like, that these boys are not working for themselves because they were not exactly trained assassins, these two boys they ran into. And that the cops are looking at them not as like suspects or anything, but that the cops have eyes on Buddy, Lee, and Ike because their sons were just murdered. And they're unconcerned. They're like, we got it. Don't worry about it. So the one that they don't kill runs back to the motorcycle gang, which are called the Rare Breed. Okay. And they get the name of Ike's landscaping company because they saw the truck parked by the apartment. And it's about to start an all-out war. So Buddy and Ike decide that maybe Rare Breed was hired to put a hit on Tangerine and also Derek and Isaiah because Tangerine might have been sleeping with a married man and then dumped, and Derek wanted to expose the story. Which I was like pretty impressed that they figured this out just by their little interrogations.
Yeah. I felt like a lot of the things that they realized and discovered, it was a stretch.
Yes. Okay.
It was
I agree.
Stretch.
And I thought it was wrong because it was a stretch. Like when they first said, they're like, okay, so it must be that Tangerine was sleeping with a married man and then he didn't want anyone to find out. So he ordered a hit. And I was like, this seems like a lot.
I'm not saying that they're not intelligent men because I definitely feel like Ike's character is intelligent, whereas I feel like Buddy Lee is more surface level. And I just, it was a stretch. I can't really see them coming to these conclusions. And then because he saw like a drawing of a tangerine on like the fridge. Like it was a lot.
That part was weird. How'd you know it was a tangerine?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, it could have been an orange. I'm like, why was that? This is what they left behind as their clues. I don't think so. But anyway, so yeah. I actually thought it was a misdirect because it was such a stretch. So I was like, oh, that can't be what's actually happening.
I didn't even think about that, but that's a good point.
Yeah, because it was like, it just happened that they found this picture of a tangerine drawn on on their refrigerator and stuff. And the napkins from the bar. Like, why did you save all those napkins?
I know. I mean, the voicemail I feel was like helpful, but that was probably the only thing that would lead them in some kind of direction. But
yes, that told them that it definitely was most likely someone who they were trying to write a story and then they like
Mm-hmm.
chickened out. But like the like when you go to Chipotle and you take like enough napkins for 3 years worth of Chipotle, don't arrest me. You just take like a whole stack, like just have, this is what they did with this bar, which is weird. So you're just leaving the bar with like a stack of napkins. I don't know.
Did I ever tell you my recent Chipotle story about the anxiety I got when I walked in there and left?
No, he left.
Yeah, so I don't really go to Chipotle very often. I usually get like Bubba Coos. And so I wasn't sure how like the ordering system worked there. And I walked in and I just saw all these options and I didn't know what I wanted. And I just had like a pure anxiety attack in the middle of Chipotle and I just turned around and walked out. And I went and
You
got food
sound like
somewhere else.
such a boomer right now.
I
Like,
just didn't know. I was like,
what is
I was
this?
like, but I don't know what I want on it, and they're gonna like judge me because I don't get a lot of toppings, and I just was, I don't know. I had a pure anxiety moment and just left.
Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry for you because you would have enjoyed a wonderful burrito bowl.
hmm
I go more often than I'd like
I
to admit.
feel like I need to
So,
go with you so I can experience what I'm supposed to do, and that way I
yes.
won't have this scenario happen
This
again.
is also surprising because Bubba Coos has like 3 billion toppings, and Chipotle has like 10.
I know, but because I get the same thing every time I go to Bubba Coos, so I'm not stressed because I know what I want as
Yeah.
soon as I walk in. Whereas Chipotle, I don't know what I want at all.
Yeah, that's true. All right. We'll make it a date and you can
Perfect.
figure it out to prep yourself for next
Yeah.
time.
That sounds like a smart plan. Anyways, back to the story.
And when we leave, I'll bring a bunch of napkins with us. Anyway, that's not the point. Okay, so where was I? All right. So their mission becomes to find Tangerine. And they do, but so does Rare Breed. And somehow Ike and Buddy get out alive again, taking Tangerine with them, leaving 3 dead gang members, Tangerine's dead mother, and Grayson, the president of the motorcycle gang. I hate this man. Seriously regrets that he underestimated these 2 old dudes for the second time in a row.
But also, can we just discuss that the only reason why they found Tangerine is because of Ike and Buddy Lee?
Yeah.
Because they put a
were
tail
not-
they put a tail on them because they realized that they were figuring this out when they couldn't. So
Yeah, they're not that successful as like contract killers, I
No.
don't think.
and they got their answers from other people. Like there was a middleman between Buddy and Ike and the Rare Breed with Slice. So Slice was
Mhm,
able to figure
mhm.
out where Tangerine was, and then apparently he like knew Grayson. So which I guess I shouldn't be surprised, and he just like tells Grayson like, "Oh, this is where they're going." So he only
Yeah,
found out.
also,
So like Rare Breed only found out because Buddy and Ike were super investigating and they figured it out. So
yeah.
they're
And also,
useless
fuck
men.
Slice.
I know.
Like, there was that whole separate storyline of like Slice and Ike's relationship, but the fact that he sold them out, I mean, like you said, Rare Breed was already tailing Ike and Buddy
Mhm.
Lee, so it didn't really matter. They would have gotten
Yeah.
there eventually, but I think they would have had a little more time to get Tangerine out of there or get more information or whatever. So it turns out that the reason that the mystery guy didn't want anyone to know about Tangerine once he broke up with her is because Tangerine is trans, which just about makes Ike and Buddy's heads explode. Like they cannot comprehend this. And I don't feel for them because they are like homophobic and transphobic,
Yeah.
but they are trying to understand
Yeah.
their sons, and they are trying to understand this completely separate world that their sons were such a big part of. And they're realizing that it's not just about them being upset that their sons are gay. Like, no, this was an entire community that their sons felt comfortable in, that they were protecting their friends, they were, protecting each other. And it's basically this whole part of their sons' lives that they didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's part of the hard part also, that they're just finding that out.
Mm-hmm.
So the Rare Breed lures Maya and Buddy Lee into a trap, and they kidnap 3-year-old Ariana. my head almost exploded at this part. I was like, I don't like this. I don't like where this is going at all.
No, because especially since they're so ruthless, or more that Grayson is so ruthless that I was
Hmm.
really paranoid that he was actually gonna kill her. And I actually thought that Maya died in that car accident, and then I realized she didn't. She was in the hospital, but it made it seem like the way that it was written from their point of view, it made it seem like she had died.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't have been surprised if they like killed her off in there to kind of like
Yeah.
add to all of these
Yep.
reasons. So, like you said, Maya lives, but she's in the hospital fighting for her life. And Buddy is also in the hospital, and he confesses to Ike that he is the one who vandalized the boys' tombstones in order to convince Ike to go all vigilante. And Ike loses his shit, which personally I think is a little unfair because even though Buddy was that slight provocation, that made Ike unleash Uriah Randolph in about 4 seconds. So I'm like, you can't really fully blame Buddy Lee for this one.
Yeah.
So Buddy figures out that Tangerine's boyfriend, who ordered the 3 hits, is Judge Gerald Winthrop Culpepper, aka Derek's mom's new husband. And did you see this coming?
No, and I also don't. And again, here's the situation where how did Buddy Lee come to the decision that it was this guy because of the double? It was just, again, he's not smart enough. Like, I love Buddy
Mhm.
Lee. He was actually my favorite in the book. But, like, he's just not smart enough to figure this out. And it was just very much, it wasn't realistic, in my opinion.
I agree. The math was not mathing to make
Mm-hmm.
this happen. I did I did see it coming from a reader's point of view because they kept bringing Chrissy back
Yeah, it makes
into the
sense
story.
why they were doing that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you knew that, and they kept like talking shit about her husband. So you knew
Mm-hmm.
that he had to be up to something, or not necessarily that he was with Tangerine, but that he could be responsible somehow or working with Rare Breed or whatever. But
I don't even
I
think
agree.
I don't even think that I figured that out, if I'm honest with you. I don't know
Well,
that it took me down. I mean, I understood like that they kept bringing. I don't think that I was into her character enough to care about the husband, so I don't. It was so far from my mind that I
yeah.
didn't even. When it happened, I was like, "Oh, this is actually." I thought the concept was really. I enjoyed that that was who it was, and I thought that that was really
Hmm.
interesting. But I just thought that how they got there could have been done way better.
Yeah. I think what we talked about at the start, that this thriller aspect of it was
Mm-hmm.
kind of secondary. So as a reader, you're not really looking to
Agreed.
figure out how that happened. And I think it's a really good point that you brought up that Buddy is the one that figured this out when
Yeah.
Buddy would not figure this out.
No, he's a drunk. Like he's a drunk,
I know.
and he doesn't seem very smart, judging by his tenor and how he speaks and his living situation and how he grew up. Like it's just like we said, the math just ain't mathing. Like
Hmm.
I want to give him credit because I think that he's the funniest character, but it just
Hmm.
was. It wasn't.
And this was like his hero moment because when he confesses to Ike that he's the one who vandalized the tombstones, and Ike basically says, like, I want nothing to do with you. How could you do that? Like, you're the reason that all this is happening. And of course, Ike is at a heightened emotional state because Maya is fighting for her life.
Yeah.
Ariana just got kidnapped. Like, I get why he flips out on Buddy Lee. And Buddy feels so alone. And then when he, magically figures this out, he's like, okay, this is my chance to right the wrongs. I don't know
Yeah.
how he thought that he was actually gonna go there and solve it, but that speaks to Buddy's character. He doesn't think things through. He just thinks, I figured it out. I'm gonna drive over there. And he drives to their house and drives his truck through the house and tries to kill Gerald with a baseball bat, which obviously doesn't work.
Actually, I personally really enjoyed this whole scene because I just feel like
Hmm.
Buddy Lee like was just he was ready. He was like, I'm
Hmm.
gonna just fuck shit up, and he gave zero fucks.
Well, he was already in so deep
Yeah.
that it's like he didn't have anything to lose. He literally didn't have anything to lose. And that was also the difference between Ike and Buddy, is that Ike still had Maya and
Yeah.
Ariana and this business and this life, but Buddy didn't really have anyone. Like, he didn't
And he
have
was
any friends, no
dying, so it
family.
just was there. He realistically had nothing left to live for. So when you're
Hmm.
put in that scenario, it was
Yeah.
you're gonna do whatever you want to do because the repercussions aren't going to be as severe because
Yeah.
what matters.
Hmm.
But him just driving his listen, I have so many questions about how this truck survived all the shit that this truck went through because it's not real. There's no way. But he
That's
just
the most unbelievable part of this whole book.
like it's like Herbie fully loaded, but a truck. Like it just was like I'm ready to go. Like where's Lindsay Lohan?
Yeah.
Is she gonna pop out and like fix the
Stop
car
it.
magically? But it was like wild. I was
Yeah.
this.
They were
It's
like
like
running people over, slamming into. Oh, when they were at Tangerine's house and they like ran over a bunch of the motorcycles. I'm like,
yeah.
it,
How does your
he just
car
kept on
survive?
trucking.
Like
Yeah.
and they hit the sedan. Like I was just this thing
Yeah.
was already. Buddy made it sound like it was a piece of shit truck. So
Hmm.
how
Meanwhile, like, I hit a curb and my whole car explodes. So, I mean,
legitimately
I don't
So
know. I need to figure out what brand this truck was. Maybe look
yep.
into their durability. Anyway, so Gerald gets Buddy released from jail after Buddy tries to kill him because he says they're going to make a trade. They're going to trade Tangerine for Ariana because Ike and Buddy basically brought Tangerine somewhere where no one would be able to find her and to protect her because they knew that Rare
Yeah.
Breed was still after her. But Ike and Buddy decide they need a better bargaining chip, so they kidnap Gerald's daddy, Gatsby. The white men in this book are named flawlessly. No notes. Gerald, Gatsby, Buddy Lee. I
Uh-huh.
can't. And they calculated right because Gerald would gladly give up his wife and order a child to be killed, but he loves his daddy.
Yeah. Which is
So,
weird in itself. The obsession.
yeah, and it was weird because not that I wanted background information on Gerald and his dad, but the fact that we didn't have any, we just
Mm.
kind of have to accept and believe that this is the situation. Like, that this is,
Yeah.
I mean, it is proven when they reveal to Gerald that they took his dad and Gerald like loses his mind, but it was a pretty big calculation.
Yeah.
So Ike and Buddy have to figure out how they're going to get Ariana and get out of there alive because they know that even with this trade, there's no way that Rare Breed is letting them walk away because they have killed many of their members. They've
Yes.
embarrassed them, they've made
Mm.
them look stupid. And Grayson, we know he's got an ego problem and he doesn't want these two old dudes beating him. So long story short, they're able to lure the Rare Breed to the meeting place of their choosing because now they have the upper hand. They make the trade and it turns into a shootout. There's a 3-year-old there, by the way. Turns into a shootout. I'm talking machine guns, automatic shotguns. I'm surprised there wasn't a grenade launcher involved. There actually could have been, and
It
I
was a
just missed it. I don't know.
pure bloodbath.
It was like, I mean, it reminded me of like the Waco bunker situation. Like, it was
Yeah.
crazy. So the real plan is that Ike and Buddy rigged a fuse, once again using supplies from the landscaping company, to detonate an atomic level bomb in this shack, and they escape through a tunnel underneath the warehouse. So they go back after the explosion and check that everyone is dead. And it's like there's limbs hanging from the
Yeah.
trees, there's a crater in the earth. Like, this was a big bomb. And somehow Grayson made it through the explosion.
I didn't love that.
I didn't love that either, but I understand. First of all, they left the child alone. What are we doing here? I understand why it was necessary because Buddy has to have his
Mm-hmm.
going down swinging hero moment. So basically, he knew that he was dying. We knew that he was unhealthy as the readers, and he didn't have much to live for anymore. Now he got his justice. he doesn't have anything else to really hold on to. So at least he knows that he saved Ariana and Ike was by his side in the end.
Yeah. I think that one of my favorite things about the book was the evolution of their relationship and their friendship.
I completely agree. I completely agree. I'll get to that. Okay. So what did you think of this ending? All of it. The kidnapping, Buddy's death, the shootout, the justice.
I didn't love the kidnapping, but it made sense in a way to try to make for them to try to get Tangerine without. It made sense to do that in a sense to them to somehow get them to give up Tangerine because Ike was so hell bent on not giving them Tangerine.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to save her. So I get that. I really liked the idea of kidnapping the white daddy, who was so weird, and that whole scenario.
Mm-hmm.
I actually thought that the Buddy's idea of the meeting spot was really creative. And I thought Ike's idea to create the bomb from, like, again, his knowledge of his employment was creative.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't love Grayson surviving, because how?
Yeah.
Again, how? When everyone else was clearly deceased, how did he somehow survive? And then I also liked that the Culpeppers' demise came as well, because they didn't, they were able to go back and actually kill Gerald themselves, and it was he was such a wuss because now he's begging for his life. He's like, please don't kill me. And it's like, what do you mean, please don't kill me? Like, go with dignity at this point. Like, you fucked this whole thing up. This is your doing. Now you want to try. You really think that these badass criminals are gonna let you walk away from this? Like, come on. Look at the terror that they've just created in the past, like, 10 minutes, and you think they're just gonna let you go? Like,
and look at how many bodies you have stacked underneath you.
Yeah.
You were about to order the hit on a 3-year-old little girl.
Yeah. Like, you really think
and
they're
gonna
walk away from this because you
Yeah.
think that you're high and mighty? Like, it's the white privilege with him he was saturated in it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And even just like his relationship with Derek, like he wouldn't let Derek call him granddaddy because he wasn't blood, so he didn't deserve it and all this stuff. Like, who the fuck are you?
Yeah.
Literally no one cares. So yeah, I pretty much agree with everything that you said. Like the same things that I liked. I think the Grayson thing could have worked if they had said how he was like escaping around the back to make sure that he, like, you know what I mean? Like, it could have been done a little better. Yeah, I also really liked that you knew that Buddy was going to die. You knew that he was going to die in some heroic way. And it was kind of like, with this big ending, you didn't know how it was going to happen. Like, was he going to sacrifice himself? Like, what was going to happen with that? And I agree with their idea to make this, the meeting spot and this crazy bomb and stuff. And it, like, spoke to their strengths, because Ike's really was his knowledge of his business and his just intelligence overall, and Buddy's was his street smarts and his, like, well, we're gonna need all this ammunition, and also like fucking over his half brother in the process because he like blew up his warehouse with all of his guns, which I also appreciated.
Yeah, but it seemed like they had a weird relationship too, and his half brother wasn't really there for him in other instances. So
yeah, that's why I was like, exactly. I was like, he deserved that. So good thing that, because Buddy's half brother probably would have had him killed if Buddy had lived because of that.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So he had to go anyway.
Yeah.
So obviously there's so many complex like biases and discriminations. There's so much that it's almost hard to follow, even though it's not far-fetched at all. Like we talked about Buddy not really realizing that he was racist, and Ike kind of having to like school him on that. And Ike also has his own issues. Like he has this conversation with the bartender in the gay bar, and he says, basically being Black is 1,000 times harder than being gay, because his argument is that you can't see when you look at someone that they're gay, but you can see when you look at someone that they're Black.
Yeah.
Completely valid. But the bartender at the gay bar points out that, yes, gay people can hide who they are, but the fact that he thinks that they should hide who they are shows what's still wrong and shows what's still dangerous. And there's this horrible sentiment that if your son is gay, that you failed as a man and you failed as a father, especially in the Black community. It's even more amplified. So it's just like this horrible, you're seeing this transformation of Ike, especially in that scene in the barbershop where he's like overhearing these other, Black men talk about what a disgrace it would be to have a gay son and all this stuff. And it's like so painful for him to hear. And I feel like it just points out this like issue that Ike is finally coming to accept his son and coming to accept that has nothing to do with him as a father. Like he has no control over who his son was. Like that has nothing to do with you. First of all, like stop making it about you. And even as his opinion is changing, he's seeing that as a whole, like the community at large, that is still the sentiment and that is still the opinion. And just because he's growing doesn't mean that everyone else is, and like the only reason that he's being forced to confront the issues that he has is because it was his son. Yeah. Whereas these other guys, they don't have to confront that. They can just look at it as like, oh yeah, look at that family over there. I can't believe that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Also, the message keeps coming back about love. Obviously, that love is love, and that the men should have loved their sons no matter how they felt about their sexual partners, that Maya loved Isaiah no matter what, that Buddy still loved Chrissy, even though she definitely sounds like she sucks.
Yeah.
So that was like a big thing in here, and I wish that we got more about Derek and Isaiah and their relationship.
Yeah. It was kind of, it was definitely the catalyst of the book, but I agree, there wasn't really much on it. It was just kind of like as big as that was in this book, it was still kind of like background.
Yeah, and the flashbacks that we got were more centered on the bad reactions that Ike and Buddy had to their sons as opposed to their actual life together. So I feel like if we had gotten a little bit more of their background or even more flashbacks of like their relationship or even them interacting with Maya or someone who did support them, it would have really like cemented the reason for all of this. You know what I mean? So how do you think Buddy's racism and Ike's homophobia changed throughout the book, if you think that they did?
I think Buddy Lee's racism definitely, not that I wouldn't say that it necessarily changed because, Buddy Lee admits that he didn't realize that he was racist because he just wasn't familiar with the Black community. And he says, I'm never really around many Black people. And he was raised a certain way. So he just doesn't know the difference. He was never taught the difference. So I actually think that him learning from Ike was beneficial for him. And I feel like it changed his whole framework on how to look at the situation. And I feel like he made little comments throughout the book that shows that. So I really liked that. That one was nice. My biggest problem with this book was the homophobia. I didn't like that it was beaten down our throats to the point that it was too much for me. And I understood that it was a huge concept of the book and I liked it, but the author just kept repeating how homophobic like Ike was and how against his son he was. And it's like upsetting, but I can understand that this is probably realistic, that it took the murder of his son to come to terms with the fact that his son was gay, and now he's trying to avenge his son. And not that it makes him love him any less, but it's unfortunate that this is now what he has to do in order to prove it's like he's trying to prove that he loves his son when he had the opportunity to prove he loved his son when he was here and he didn't.
Yes.
So because it was a lot for me, and it was hard for me to get through the book at some points because I feel like Buddy Lee was also like homophobic, but his approach was different for me than it was for Ike. And that could be also because you discussed that how hard it is to be gay in the Black community, and that is completely different than how it is in the white community, and it's different in every community, Asian American, like everything. Like it's approached so differently depending on how you were raised and how your family was raised throughout life. So but it was a lot for me. It was really a lot for me.
I agree with that, especially because of that whole scene in the gay bar
Yes.
where that drunk guy is hitting on Ike and he loses his shit
Yeah.
and he gets violent with him and Buddy says to him like, dude, he was just like drunk and he just like touched your arm. Like it wasn't that big of
It
a deal.
wasn't,
And
yeah. It wasn't like sexual assault. Like it
yeah,
wasn't like this gay man knew that Ike was straight and that he was
right.
still pursuing him. Like it was like, no, this guy was he was obliterated and he's in a gay bar. He's going to assume the man next to him is gay. And he
Yeah.
just wasn't reading the signs, but he wasn't doing it in a malicious way. He was just
Yeah. And
gay and
Ike
being
didn't
dumb,
say
or not
I'm
gay.
not
He was
gay.
being drunk and like dumb. Like he was
Yeah.
just, and I agree. And Ike wasn't saying. He just says like, "Don't put your hands on me." Like he was just getting aggressive immediately.
hmm And I think that it was such a hard part to read, but I think it magnifies this like much bigger picture of Buddy is a lot quicker to accept his son, even
Hmm.
though this is all after their death. I mean,
Yeah,
we
same
know
thing with
that
Buddy. He was the
it's
same
too
way.
late.
Yeah.
Exactly. But Buddy is so much quicker after the son's death to switch his mind frame and realize that like it doesn't matter. Like he's a lot quicker to accept his son being gay and deaf and to openly admit that he shouldn't have given a fuck
Hmm.
when the boys were
Yeah.
alive. He says it don't fucking matter who he wanted to wake up next to as long as he
Because
was
he was,
waking up.
I really, that hit me when I read that. I was
Hmm
like, he really came to terms with it a lot quicker.
hmm
Which
But
like
then you
speaks a lot to his character in a sense, because not
hmm
that these men were good people and they don't deserve, they were fucked up and they treated their
yeah.
sons terribly when they were alive, but it speaks to the evolution of Buddy in general. I think in
hmm
this book was one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
If I
I
had
completely
to
agree.
pick something, it was him. Like it really, really was. And then I love that he called his granddaughter Little Bit. Like that got me.
Yeah.
So
That
it
was
was
cute.
just, yeah.
And that they both accepted the granddaughter in the end.
Yes.
I think that it was purposeful by the author that Ike's acceptance was so
Hmm.
much harder
Yeah.
because just in general, Ike's life has been so much harder than Buddy's
Hmm.
because of white privilege and because Ike is an ex-criminal who is also black, who is in the South, who has had to fight against all of these things.
Hmm.
And I agree that that it was a lot. It was a lot how much they focused on it, but I definitely think all of that was purposeful
Oh, I
in the
agree.
way
Yeah.
that it's like
Yeah.
he had such a hard time accepting because people were comparing being
Hmm.
gay to being black, and he had a
Hmm.
very big issue with that, which is totally understandable, but the two things are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to think that one is hard and the other isn't.
Hmm.
You don't have to pick. You know what I mean? Like they are
Hmm.
both of these things are affecting the way that society perceives him, perceives their sons. Like it is just so much bigger than that. So I agree. I thought it was definitely magnified and I understood why, but it was very hard to read. Like
Yeah.
that scene specifically, I get it. I totally understand the purpose for it. And I think it was necessary for the book, but it was a lot.
Hmm.
So, what did you think? We talked about it a little bit, but what do you think about Ike and Buddy Lee's relationship and how they grew through this? They like had never even met each other at the
I
beginning.
know. And I really liked, there was a part where Buddy said, like, I really wish we met at the wedding. And because neither had gone to their son's wedding. And so it was, they kind of accepted that the fact that if they had met all the time ago, I don't think they would be as close as they are now, realistically, because they needed to go through this tragedy in order to even start a relationship. But it's like in hindsight, I feel like they're constantly thinking about the what ifs. And it's like, so if we weren't such, homophobic assholes, then we could have met sooner. And
Hmm
maybe we could have begun a friendship because our sons were in love. And now we're
hmm
kind of family because of this. And so they didn't get a chance to realistically embark on that journey of a
hmm
friendship. And it's like just so funny to me because Ike immediately like dislikes Buddy Lee in a sense, and then Buddy Lee just like grows on him, and then he's like, "I really just called this guy my friend. Like I never in a million years would have called him a friend."
That was so sweet.
So I think that their friendship was something that I really enjoyed in the book as well.
Mm-hmm. It was also this like forced proximity because if they had gotten to know each other sooner, Buddy Lee probably would have made one racist comment and Ike would have been like, all right, I'm out.
Yeah.
But the fact that they were still determined to see this through together, instead it turned into this like teaching experience, which it didn't have to be, but Ike, you know, handled that really well with Buddy. And I also think it speaks to the fact that Ike had other stuff in his life. Like we talked about, he had his business, he had Maya, he had all these other things. So he didn't need a friendship with Buddy Lee, whereas Buddy Lee was lonely. And he, not that he needed this friendship, but he would be more quick to accept a new friendship. You know what I mean?
I agree. And and it was so sad for me, the secondary relationship he could have had with his neighbor Margot, because it was like so I loved that scene when Ike was like, "She like you," and he's like, "No, he doesn't. No, she doesn't." Like Buddy Lee is just so like, she doesn't like who he's like, so it's like so funny to me. Exactly, because he's so like negative about himself, and I'm just like like, you have these good attributes about you and someone does care for you, and he was just like, he couldn't like see that. And so it's like sad that he never really got that moment with her, but it's like you could tell that how much Margot cared for him, even especially at the end when she's like at his grave and stuff like that. I like that. I thought that was really sweet. Little secondary part of the book that wasn't really a big deal, but it was.
Yeah, because at first I was like, why are they introducing this character? This is stupid. But then the more that they didn't make it a big deal, the more I liked it. Like that she just kind of existed there.
Yeah.
I really appreciated their friendship because they were both fighting these demons within themselves, but they were able to honestly say that to each other. Like they were able to admit to each other that they didn't accept their sons, and they realized now that they should have. They realized that they fucked up. Like even though we knew that they were thinking this in their brains, the fact that they had this in common, they were able to say it to each other.
Yeah.
Which was a big deal.
Which is kind of nice too, because men don't talk. They're not very communicative with each other, especially when it comes to sensitive topics and their feelings. And it amplifies it even more because it is a black man, a white man talking about their feelings together. So
absolutely,
the portrayal of their friendship was just the author did a very, very good job with it. And even being a black author, like I feel like he could have written Buddy Lee way worse than he did, and he was, and made him a likable character, which was interesting. I thought that was a very interesting take, and I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I agree. I think Buddy was written, even though he was so shitty and he did treat his son so horribly and all these things, like he still was likable because he was quick to regret all of that. I mean, I guess not quick because it was his son's entire life, but he was more open. I feel like he definitely was the more open and emotional one out of the two of them. And he just said what he felt. Like he didn't give a shit how it would come off. And sometimes that was bad, but sometimes that was good. So, and it allowed them to have a closer relationship, even though it took Ike longer to open up.
Yeah.
So what did you think of the writing style?
I don't think it was my favorite. And I think that a lot of I really disliked the chapters from the rare breeds point of view. Like,
oh yeah.
It gave me the ick, and immediately gave me the ick, and I just wasn't into it. And I don't know. It was just, I wasn't a huge fan of the.
So abrasive and vulgar and unnecessarily aggressive.
Yes, and it was hard for me to read at some points. So I feel like I would be willing to read his other books, because I think that once he finally, I feel like his concepts are very interesting. I just don't think that this one was executed that great. It could have been, I think it definitely could have been a little bit cleaner, but I still, like the last 50 pages of the book, like I was enraptured, and that it took, I wasn't a huge fan of this book until that point. So if he was able to redeem himself from me not wanting to, for me not enjoying the book from the beginning, I have to give him credit because then.
Yeah. I would definitely want to read the other one, Blacktop Wasteland, because I know that that was his more successful one. And I would just be interested to read it because, like you said, the concepts are there.
Yeah.
I thought it was a really slow start for me because at the beginning it was very conversational.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of Southern slang. So I had to reread a lot of it.
I agree with that.
It was kind of like Crawdads. Like it took me a little bit to get into the rhythm.
Yeah.
But once the story started to take shape, I was more into it. I agree. I hated everything with the Rare Breed. I thought they were disgusting. But
like their
once
racism was so blatant to the point that it was like it was hard to take in.
And just their inclination to violence at all costs.
And like their narcissism and that they were better than everybody else and they're just trash.
And they talk about this brotherhood, but then they're like Grayson is threatening every member if they don't do what he says. Like, oh, if you don't kill that little girl, I'm going to kill you. Like, what the fuck? And I'm not saying this isn't real because I'm sure that this is real in some of these type of gangs. You know what I mean? But that didn't make it any easier to read. And definitely even when it, like the first episode with them, the first chapter with them, I was like, ew, like, why are we introducing these people? Obviously, they ended up being very relevant and necessary for the story. But at first I was like, I don't like it. So yeah, the beginning was a little rough for me, but then it started to like get its groove. And I would definitely want to read another one of his.
Yeah, I would be interested. I would definitely, it's not like it's a Stephen Graham Jones where I'm like, I'm never reading another one of his books. Like I would be willing to read another book by S.A. Cosby because it was.
And not for nothing, this is a book written by a man about men. Thank you for that. Thank you for not writing women because we don't want you to.
Yeah.
And obviously a Black man writing about a Black man's struggles.
Yeah.
So that was super
And like
apparent.
I said, I feel like the way that he wrote Buddy Lee, I was pleasantly surprised with it. Like I really was. Because I feel like he could have, especially since the book was so blatantly about racism and homophobia, I feel like he could have written Buddy Lee as like this narcissist, white privileged man, and he didn't. He wrote the Culpeppers like that, which that was correct and the right way to go about it. But the way that he wrote Buddy Lee, especially because Buddy Lee was homophobic and a criminal, and then you just fucking find him endearing, and that's wild to me that I found Buddy Lee endearing. Like, what? How?
I know. And even Ike with his hardened exterior, when he finally accepts Ariana in the end,
I loved that. And it speaks a lot too to his character because, you know, he took the rap for a murder for someone that he wasn't even related to, and he knew that in order to survive prison, he had to get into the hardest gang that there was. Otherwise, he wasn't going to make it. And so he had to make these tough life decisions at a young age, and it's hardened him. And the fact that he can't come to terms with the fact that he has he has a gay son, and he
was endearing in his own way because he had gone through all these struggles, and in the back of his mind, everything that he did was to get home to his wife and son. And then he does get home to his wife and son, and he doesn't treat them the way that he should, and he doesn't accept his son the way that he should. And so it takes much longer to warm up to him because he has this hard exterior.
I agree.
But you do get there.
It's not that I disliked his character, because I definitely didn't, but it took me a while to I wouldn't say relate to him. It took me a while to really maybe enjoy his character is a way to kind of put it.
Yeah, I think it was an intentional thing too. Yes, like it was harder for us to connect with him because he had so many walls up.
That's exactly what I was trying to say.
So when you start to think of it like that, like I admire the author's writing even more. Like it was so layered.
Yeah.
You know? All right, so are we ready to get to the ratings?
Yes.
So our rating scale is pocket knives.
Oh, wait, that whole thing with, like, Buddy Lee and his, like, emotional attachment to his pocket knife, which was almost kind of ironic because I felt like he didn't have like a great relationship with his dad. And his dad
Yeah.
was kind of a dick, so that was kind of like interesting to me that he had like this attachment to like the pocket knife.
It was a very weird thing, and they didn't really dive into
No,
it,
it's just like it was like
but
this
they did
was yeah.
say that he didn't have a good relationship with his dad.
Yeah.
And they definitely, and he even says like he wishes that he had a better relationship with his son than he had with his dad. Like he knew that it was like a generational issue,
hmm Yep.
but it was just something about that pocket knife
Yeah.
because his dad was also violent.
Yes.
So it's like that's where he got his proclivity to violence.
hmm
And this pocket knife is just, he's very attached to it.
And which I think that's interesting. It speaks to both of their sons because they both can't come from criminal fathers, and neither of them had any interest in being in that sort of life. So that's kind of that was also an interesting take.
Hmm. Yeah, they were so.
Because I feel like it's so common that when you're a male and your father is a hardened criminal and into that life, I feel like you're more susceptible to become like your father. And
Yeah.
they
Well, I
didn't.
mean, it's.
Neither of them were like their fathers at all. And
Hmm.
Derek had a shitty mom, and he
Hmm.
wasn't anything like, I mean, obviously, like we said, we don't really know much about their characters, realistically. They're just kind of like placeholders in a sense, but it
Hmm.
was, Isaiah obviously had a really caring mom, whereas Derek
Hmm.
seemed to have neither from his parents. Like, I feel like Buddy
Exactly.
Lee did love Derek. That came across to me, but he just couldn't accept him for who he was. Because he said,
Hmm.
he's like, we would talk all the time, but when it came to talk about, Derek wanted to talk about his life and who he was, Buddy Lee would just shut down.
Hmm.
So,
I agree with that. And from what we do know about Derek and Isaiah, we know how they didn't let their dads
mhm.
damper their lives, damper their relationship. Like the fact that Isaiah was the reporter who specifically was writing for this paper that focused on
Yeah.
LGBTQ
Uh-huh.
issues and, stuff like that. Like it just shows that it didn't matter what Buddy and Ike did. They were going to be who they were going to be. And
And that
that's
just speaks to
such a
yeah.
huge,
Mm-hmm.
brave thing
Mm-hmm.
when everything was working against them.
Yep. 100%.
All right. So, how many pocket knives are you giving Razorblade Tears?
I gave it 3.5. I actually thought my rating was going to be bad on this one, if I'm honest with you, until I got to like no joke, the last 50 pages. I was like, and it was so funny to me because, and I said this to my husband, you and I have been so on par with like how we took a book and our ratings. And when I saw your rating before I even finished it, and I was like, oh my God, I think this might be like the first book that we're on such different like sides of the coin. But I did come a little bit closer to you, but I was like, I thought this was going to be like a 2.5. Like I really did. And then I was enraptured. So I was like, oh, okay, I can give it 3.5 stars. But yeah, it was just a lot. The homophobia was just a lot for me. It was a lot to take in. And I feel it was just the depth to the story was so surface level. And I feel like it could have been more like with their investigation. I feel like that was kind of like non-believable in a sense.
Yes.
So it there was not enough concrete evidence for them that really made me believe what they were doing was what could actually happen. I mean, regardless, it's a story. Of course, they're going to be far-fetched because that's what makes a story. But it wasn't as believable for me. But I really did enjoy the characters themselves and the relationships between the characters. Those things were really, really nice. I think it was just kind of like the fodder and all that I just couldn't really get behind. But regardless, I still, like I said, I would definitely read more of his books. I would give him another shot, 100%.
I think if I was rating it based on a thriller, my rating would be much lower.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, yeah, it's not believable, but we read so many books that aren't believable, but they're written in a way that even though they're unbelievable, they make sense.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
I completely agree.
I felt that the storyline part was lacking. But after reading this, it just feels like such an important book to read. And I'm about to go on a rant. It just made me so fucking sad. Like, I don't care that it's fiction. It's a microcosm of the world and the society we live in. And it made me sad on a larger scale that we're still living in a world where homophobia and transphobia and obviously racism exists
Mm-hmm.
and show themselves every single day. And then on a smaller scale, that these fathers would wait until their children are dead
Mm-hmm.
to love them instead of just going to therapy for their own bigotry.
Mm-hmm.
And it also made me sad that they needed to give up the lives that they'd worked for to take justice into their own hands because they couldn't trust the cops to do it, because
Mm-hmm.
the cops did not give a fuck. And that happens every day.
Mm-hmm.
Not the level of gang violence and blatant murder that we saw in this, but the hatred and the families being ripped apart and all of that. So even though I didn't love the writing style, the overall message of the book and just the way it made me feel in the way that I feel like it's a necessary
Yeah,
book to read.
I completely agree with everything you are saying right now.
Yeah, so I feel like that's why I bumped my rating to a 4.5.
Mm-hmm.
I was between 4 and 4.5, but just the fact of how layered and how complex these characters were
Mm-hmm. Well,
when you look at it through that lens.
it's like we say all the time. Your rating is just based on how the book made you feel. It could have been written so shittily, but like
Hmm.
if it still made you feel something, like that's important. It's not
Hmm.
a book isn't just the writing. It's a book is supposed to pull things out of you and make you feel things. And so if you know, it could be it could have the most flawless writing style and be perfectly written, but if I close that book and I have no true opinion on it at the end about how I felt, how I feel, and how I related to it, like then that's not good. Like
Hmm.
I'd rather read a terribly written book and come out of it feeling for the characters and the storyline and, like you said, the layers and the portrayal of the hardships. That's more
Hmm.
important to me than the writing.
Yeah. It's so much more than just, oh, I liked it or I didn't like
Yeah.
it. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's even that's how I felt like with The Measure. That's how I felt with
Yeah.
Tattooist of Auschwitz. Like
Mm-hmm.
these are not books that I would say, wow, I really liked that. I'm going to read it again. But books that I'm like, this is so
Mm-hmm.
important because it goes farther than the book. It
Yeah.
makes you think farther than the book.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this could have been a lot stronger just, with the storyline,
Mm-hmm.
but this author is just really talented in making you realize all these different layers. And especially us reading it, like as privileged white women, like
Yeah.
we understand our
Mm-hmm.
privilege, and it's a different lens that we read it through.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I feel like it is important. I'm really happy that we read it. And I don't know. I think it was a good one. I think it was, especially now in a time when it's just so apparent and
Mm-hmm.
blatant and people can't just ignore homophobia and ignore racism and pretend it's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
This book, even though it came out 3 years ago, I mean, it was still the case 3 years ago, but it's like,
It's still the case now, and it feels like
exactly,
there's no end in sight.
exactly,
And it's
exactly.
everything. It's not. It's like it's literally everything. With all the stuff going on in Alabama with like women and like abortions
Hmm.
and eggs. Like that's just. It's like it's actually crazy that we're just going back. We're just continuously going backwards.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, so that's why it's like these books, like it makes me so sad to read it,
But it's also
but
like. But I'm
we can't
like
hide from it.
that's what I'm saying. I'm also happy that we read it because, like you said, we're not from the South. We have white privilege. We can't live a life in Black people's shoes. And so reading
Hmm.
something that they take from their heritage and their family and
Hmm.
being willing to share their thoughts is really nice.
Hmm.
It gives
And
us
I
an
think
opportunity to educate ourselves.
exactly, and to really do that extra work that
Hmm.
we need to do. And I think especially with us having been, done this for over a year now, like diversifying the books that we're reading and not just reading books that make us happy, not just reading books that are entertaining.
Hmm.
Like it's so much bigger than that. And I think that that's important for us as
Hmm.
reviewers and just as people who are concerned with societal issues and all of these things. Like,
Hmm.
yes, this is a fictional book, but
But
like we
there's
said,
always
it's
a
a
little truth.
microcosm.
Yeah, there's always a little truth to fiction.
Exactly.
Because how
Even
else?
Court of Thorns and Roses. You know what I mean? You
Yeah,
never know.
boner claws,
Gosh, gosh, I have to go. All right. Is there anything else that you
No,
want to
I
add?
think that you did a really good job in your take in covering this book because I know it could be a sensitive
Thank you.
topic, and so I think you did really well.
And we definitely tried to do this as well as we could,
Mm-hmm.
to cover this as well as we could, to discuss it, because these are such huge sensitive issues, and we are doing our best,
Mm-hmm.
and we are, open to thoughts, criticisms, all of that. So if you want to reach out to us, if you want to further discuss this, we're
Mm-hmm.
completely open to that. But as far as the review, that's all we have for you today. If you like what you heard, please make sure to follow, subscribe, and rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. If you have any book recommendations or questions for us, you can email us at fullybookedcalfpod@gmail.com. Also, be sure to follow us on TikTok and Instagram at fullybookedcalfpod to see our upcoming reads. Thanks for checking us out. And remember,
If you need us, we're fully booked. Bye.
bye!